Okay, guys, so welcome to Finance for Managers. I'm Brian Sullivan. This is my background. So I have an MBA in analytical finance, so analyzing financial statements, things like that, from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And I also studied economics, which we'll talk about, and I went to UC Berkeley for that. My work experience, I've been teaching in universities for over 7 years. Accounting, finance, and business classes. So finance is my favorite. So this will be a nice class to teach you guys. I also used to work for Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, HSBC, startup companies as well. So I did a lot of stuff, product pricing, product profitability, forecasting, budgeting, which is what I'm going to teach you guys in the class today. So I think finance is very practical. So I'm going to give you guys a set of tools that you guys can use, hopefully immediately. You guys can use this and boost your productivity at work, maybe give yourself a big raise or whatever. It's going to be really useful. Yeah, so today, this is a little bit off. We're starting before 1 o'clock. We'll take a prayer break, a couple prayer breaks today. Wrap up about 10 o'clock. I know that's late, but as you guys can see, the book is pretty thick, and we have a lot of stuff to cover. So I want to cover as much as I can with you guys to give you the best opportunity to do well on the final exam and to ask questions. And plus, we'll go through practice problems together in class so that you guys can ask me questions here. I can also provide my email address if you guys have questions after the class. Just email me if you got a problem on the workbook or a question on what to study for the test, things like that. I can help direct you guys a little bit because it is a lot to get through in a short period of time, so we'll do that. Now, yeah, I just wanted to give you a little more background on my universities. Have you guys heard of those universities before? University of Chicago, UC Berkeley. Here we go. Yeah, so UC Berkeley is ranked #1 in the US for economics, and University of Chicago is #2 in the United States in terms of finance, 6 for accounting, so we're a little bit lower. In terms of the world ranking for the entire university, Berkeley is number 15 in the world, and University of Chicago is number 10 in the world. For the MBA, we're a little bit better, improving, so 13 in the world for UC Berkeley. And University of Chicago, that's where I got my MBA, #9. Sometimes we're #1, but it fluctuates from year to year. So I had a really great experience with that. So I'm going to take what I learned, from those programs and give you the best of what I learned from that, provide that to you guys today. So it's going to be fun. Okay, so let's get started with the first module here. Okay, you guys are here. Module number 1. Okay, so the course learning objectives is what we'll talk about first. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about financial markets. Financial markets are important because this is where interest rates are determined, stock prices are determined here. Financial asset prices and valuations are determined here. So this is important. Do any of you guys do any investing in the stock market? Anybody? Yeah, you guys should invest in the stock market. I'll try to give you guys some examples later of how much money you can make. Not that money is so important, but the earlier you invest in the stock market, because of these compounding returns, the growth is exponential, right? It starts off very slow, just like a small investment in the beginning starts off slow, but over time it grows exponentially like that. It's ridiculous how much money you can make. Like if you invested money for your child as a baby when they're born, how much they would have by the time they retire, no need to go to school. They would have so much money. We'll talk about accounting in the beginning. Have you guys had accounting before? Yeah, you've had some accounting. This is a little bit complex, but we try to boil this down a little bit to make it useful for you guys, accounting for managers, because you guys aren't doing the actual accounting like accountants, so we're not going to get into the very low-level accounting. We'll stick to giving you guys an understanding of financial statements and things like that will be useful and practical to you guys. We'll talk about the financial statements, which are the main outcome of the accounting section. There's going to be 3 or 4 of those guys. So I just want to give you guys a preview now. We're going to have an income statement. And you guys will have to do this on the test. You'll have to do some work on an income statement. What do you guys think an income statement shows you? So this is a report that you get at the end of the month on your company, right? Every company has this. We have an income statement. And what do we look for on this report? Why do you think this is useful to us? Yeah.
Well, explain how much revenue company
Exactly. Basically, the basics of this one are going to show you the revenue minus the expenses, and that's going to equal a profit. Hopefully it's a profit. Could be a loss, right, if the expenses are greater than the revenue. So obviously, this one is really important. Are we making money in the company or not? Another one I'll show you guys is the balance sheet. This is called the balance sheet. Do you guys have any idea what this one shows? Yeah, you remember your accounting class, exactly. Yeah, this is going to show assets, liabilities, and equity. Yeah, we call this the accounting equation. So just actually knowing this equation is actually super helpful. What are assets? What do you guys think assets are? What is an asset? Yeah.
It's physical assets of the company.
Yeah, this could be physical, or we call them like tangible or intangible. So tangible is something like this desk. This is a tangible asset, right? We can touch it, we can feel it. There's also intangible assets, things we can't touch, but they are valuable, like our bank accounts. We can't touch the bank account. Stocks are another intangible asset, patents, inventions that we have, things like that. So this is kind of anything that's valuable. These are also investments. You should think of this as investments, right? This is what we buy for the company in order to make a profit. We invest in these assets. And on this side of the equation, we talk about, okay, so how do we pay for those assets? We have 2 options to finance the assets of the company. We can use liability. What is a liability, you guys? What do you think that is? Liability? Yeah, commitment, or yeah, this is like, let's just make it easy, say this is a bank loan. We can borrow money from the bank, right? Or we can do what? What do you guys think equity is?
Loans.
This one is a loan. Liability will be the loan. Equity is going to be investors, right? Investors can buy a share of our company, and we give them shares in return. They become shareholders, investors in the company. So the order of this becomes important, right? Because if the company goes bankrupt, not that we want it to go bankrupt, of course, but these guys get the money first. That's why they're not in alphabetical order. They're in order of who gets the money back. So we liquidate the assets, right? Sell the assets. Bank gets all their money back first. Anything that's left over goes to the shareholders. So that means these guys have more risk, right, than these guys, because they could lose all their money. On the other hand, like I said, this is the stock market. This piece is the stock market. More risk, more return. So in finance, there's a trade-off between risk and return. The higher the risk of your stock market investment, the greater the potential return. If you guys invest in emerging stocks, emerging markets, right, less developed countries, your potential return is greater because they're starting off at a lower point. On the other hand, their economy is shaky and maybe it's mismanaged, like Venezuela. Anybody from Venezuela here? I had one in Jeddah, so. Yeah, and then you could lose money in that case. But there's ways to avoid that. Anyway, the idea here is how do you want to finance the purchase of these investments here? So think of assets as investments. And this is just capital structure. How do we finance that? Should we use a bank loan or should we use stock? And we'll talk about which one is better and for what reason. We'll talk about the principles of finance and some financial modeling. So you guys will do some work in Excel, maybe as you guys are doing your workbook. As I demonstrate, I'll demonstrate some Excel stuff, some simple financial models for you guys. And then I can send that to you so you guys can use that stuff. Principles of finance. So what do you guys think is the difference between accounting and finance? Because we're going to talk about both. We'll talk about accounting first. But what is finance, you guys? What do you think finance is? What's different about that? So finance deals with questions like, okay, so these are investments, but which assets should we buy? Which investment is better? We have two options, A and B, right? And they're mutually exclusive. I can do only one or the other, right? Which one's better? So I give you guys tools like net present value to calculate which one is of higher value to the company. Things like that. That's what finance is going to talk about. So we're going to talk about present value, future value. Have you guys ever heard of this stuff? Present value, future value? I'll give you a simple illustration to help you guys with that. So present value is today. This is today. This is the present. And I can give you, if I give you $100, would you guys rather have $100 today or in a year from now? Which is better, today or in a year? Why today? Exactly, because of inflation, for one. Prices generally rise over time, especially here in Saudi Arabia recently. They've been rising. So you can buy more today with 100 than you can in the future. That's one way to look at that. Another way to look at that is just the opportunity cost. What would you have done with $100 today? If I invested in the stock market, maybe I can make 15%, right? And so if I make 15%, I'll have 115 in the future, right? So $100 today can give me 115 a year from now, and you're only going to give me 100? No. So what we do is we convert these future values to a present value, right? So that we can see what's the value in today's money, right? Because these are apples and oranges, comparing cash flows today with cash flows in the future. Cash flows in the future are not the same value as cash flows today. You guys just told me that. So I'll tell you guys how to convert them, the future cash flows, into the present cash flows. And then we add those up to get the value of something. And speaking of which, that relates to the next financial statement for you guys. There's another one called cash flow, statement of cash flows. So this is an accounting, and this is the link between accounting and finance, right? So accounting is concerned with all of these financial statements. Finance is more specifically looking at cash flow. We care more about the cash flow. That's what we do this present value analysis on. And what do you guys think is the difference between the income statement and cash flow? What do I mean by cash flow? Go ahead.
Cash will show also the expenses that we have at a certain period.
This one has expenses too, but the thing is that if I make a profit here, say the profit is $1 million, does that mean that I have $1 million more in the bank? No, because this is not cash flow. For example, if somebody used their credit card to buy something with my company, that's revenue, but I haven't gotten the money yet from the credit card company. So say that the expenses were zero, just to make this simple, and they put $1 million on the credit card. My profit is $1 million. My cash flow is zero because I didn't get the money yet from the credit card company. So this converts it to cash, right? How much cash did I actually get in? How much cash did I actually spend? And what is the change in my cash flow from period to period? And this is very important. So we have an expression that they taught me at the University of Chicago called simi time. I can try to write over here. So I'll get you guys started. Cash, that's the C is cash. What do you think the I is? I, S. Cash is M-O, R, more, I-M, P. What do you guys think? O, R, more important than your what? You guys have to guess the last one. M is what? Cash is more important than your mother. Yeah, because without cash, you have no business. You can move back in with your mother. So yeah, actually, this was Hewlett Packard, you know, HP. One of those guys, is either Hewitt or Packard, came up with this expression when they were starting the company in Silicon Valley, because with a startup company, right, any company, if you run out of cash, you're done, you're finished. So this is a part of finance too, is predicting how much cash we're going to need, making sure we have enough reserves and enough options. Do we need to get a bank loan to make sure we've got enough cash flow? Because sometimes the revenue collection goes like this, right? And in those low periods, you could run out of money. So that's the worst thing that can happen to your business. So we have to manage the cash flow. So in finance, we consider this to be the most important of those financial statements. Okay, so we'll talk about tools in finance that you guys can use. So net present value is one of these tools that I'm going to give you guys that's going to analyze the cash flow of investment options, right? And the higher the net present value of your investments, the better it is, right? So if you have to choose between two projects, right, you're going to take the one that has the higher or the lower present value. What do you guys think? Higher present value, exactly. So backing up for a second, because I think a lot of people have an idea about this, but in terms of a business, what's the overall goal of the business? Yeah, most people say profit. Traditionally, this is what is taught in economics and accounting, right? They teach you to maximize profit. We assume companies maximize profit. But in finance, we say you should maximize value. Maximizing value is a little bit better than maximizing profit. So maximizing value relates to that net present value, right? Because if we have a project that has a net present value greater than zero, this means we're adding value to the company. And if we don't do this project, right, we're giving up this value. We're not maximizing the value of the company. So as financial managers, you want to maximize the value of the company. It's different than maximizing the profit, because there are things I can do in the short term to increase the profit that will affect the long-term value of the company in a bad way, right? I could, for example, stop marketing, stop advertising. So for this month, yeah, my profit goes up because I'm not advertising. I fired all those marketing people, right? Looks good. Income statement, profits up. But in the future, what's going to happen to my future number of customers if I stop marketing? It's going to go down. So this is going to affect the long-term value. So in finance, we consider the future, right? The future effects of these decisions. And we give you guys tools to analyze the analyze the impact of your decisions. Then finally, we'll talk a little bit about economics. Have you guys had any economics before? Economics? You're going to love economics. So economics, basically this boils down to supply and demand, exactly. And basically, economics is a decision-making science. Right? So I studied economics at UC Berkeley. Yeah, it's a decision-making science. So, and basically, science. Finance is a piece of economics. So finance was derived from economics. So the tools we give you in finance are about making good decisions, making better decisions, things like that. So economics relates to supply and demand. I'll just give you guys a preview here. We have graphs like this. We have price, quantity, supply, and demand. So supply is basically all the producers, right? These are all the producers. And the price that they can, their costs of producing, right? It goes higher and higher and higher. Demand is all the buyers, right? These are all the buyers. And you notice here, the higher the price, what happens to the demand? This is quantity, right? So it goes down. This is the law of demand, right? The higher the price, law of demand says the lower the quantity demand it's going to be. And together, it's called a market. This is a market, like financial market. So everything relates to economics. We can analyze everything with economics because it's a decision-making science. So how much you guys make here in Saudi Arabia, it's supply and demand. It's all supply and demand. And it depends. So the intersection of these two things determines price, and it determines quantity. This is called the market price. This is what determines how much money you guys make. And then there's factors outside, like in the economy, that influence these supply and demand. For example, the Vision 2030 and policies that they've done with the Vision 2030 affect supply and demand in the labor market for sure, right? Because they're trying to do Saudiization. They have expat taxes, dependent fee taxes, and things like that. Yeah, so for example, if we took a quick look at that, there's an expat dependent fee here, right? And I'm not judging these policies, saying that they're good or bad. We're just analyzing this with economics. So if there's an expat dependent fee, right, and say a certain number of families decide to send their families back because they can't afford this fee, what's going to happen for demand for diapers and food and schooling and things like that in Saudi Arabia? It's decreased. Yeah, so that would be a decrease in demand, right? So the demand curve is going to shift over here like this, which causes a new equilibrium to happen. Prices go down, which is what you've seen happen here in the real estate market, right? This is what's happening in the real estate market. So it's not good for the real estate market. We can say that for sure if you own real estate because there's more vacancies and things like that. It's not good for business in general. So there's always winners and losers with these policies. Now so those are some of the losers, but there's also a winner in this policy. Who's one of the winners of the policy, of the expat dependent fee? And again, I'm not saying whether this is good or bad. This is just, government, of course. Government wanted to do this because for various reasons. They thought, for one, because healthcare and electricity and water is subsidized here, and petrol prices, right? They felt that you should pay a little bit extra if you have dependents here because you're using more water, you're using more electricity, right? Maybe using more petrol because you're driving them to school. And therefore, you should share the costs of this, things like that. So when we get to this section, we can analyze some of the effects of Vision 2030, because this is important to know, like, how do these policies affect your business? If we can make some predictions with this stuff. And again, we're not judging whether this is a good or a bad policy. We're just trying to understand what is the effect of on my business going to be. And possibly there's new opportunities as a result of some of the Vision 2030 policies, right? They're opening up to tourism and things like that. So maybe we can start a new business in this area. There's good areas and there's bad areas for us. Okay, so that's a little bit of economics. Now, capital budgeting, capital structure, and working capital management. So capital budgeting relates to the assets that we talked about before, right? We have to come up with a budget for how much we're going to buy in assets for the next year. So when I'm talking about these assets, I'm talking about what we call fixed assets. So fixed assets are long-term investments. Right? I'm going to buy a new building. I'm going to open up a new store. We're going to expand our company. We're going to buy a new machine for our factory. Things like that. Those are major purchases that last for more than a year. And this is capital budgeting. That's capital budgeting. Which one should I buy? And I'll show you guys how to use the net present value and other tools to figure out whether this is a good investment or a bad investment. Capital structure relates to what I told you guys before, remember? We have assets. Assets equal what? Do you guys remember? Assets equal liabilities plus equity. Essentially, you have three ways to purchase these assets, right? I can use this one, which is what? You guys remember? What is this one? Yeah, bank loan. Or I can do this one. What is that? Yeah, sell shares in my company, make you guys owner of the company or part owner of the company. Or I can use my own cash flow, right? If you're Microsoft or Google or Apple, you have tons of cash. They have tons of cash. Do you guys know how much Apple has in cash? Any idea? It's not only in cash because they don't just leave it in cash. They do some investing, right? But approximately how much do they have, you think? It's more like, I haven't looked in a while, but around $270 billion. Maybe close to the amount that Saudi Arabia as a government has in savings. So it's big, it's huge. Yeah, so they have plenty of money, so maybe they should just finance this with cash. Well, not necessarily, because there's pros to still using debt. Right, so one of the things I want you guys to understand with this class is that debt is not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, there's risk to taking debt. This is certain, we know this. But there's at least two good things about debt as well, which I'll explain to you guys as we go through the process. It relates to using other people's money, right, to buy assets whose profit becomes your profit, right? Because when you borrow money from the bank, they're not an investor. And only the investors have the right to the profit. So we can use other people's money to generate a profit for us, the owners of the company. So this is called leverage. We leverage our money with some bank money, and we can increase the return to the shareholders by using the bank's money. And if you're in the United States, you get a tax deduction, not just the US, but other countries as well, for the interest that you pay on the loans. Here they call it profit. And there's no real taxes here, well, VAT and some expat taxes. But yeah, you get an interest deduction. Whereas, do you guys know if you have stock, what do we pay the stockholders? They don't get interest, we pay them what? Begins with a D. These guys get a dividend. Right, so they get a dividend, and dividends are taxed, right? The individual is taxed for the dividends, and there's no tax deduction for the corporation. So the benefits of debt are the tax deduction that you get for issuing the debt, and also you increase the leverage of your investors' money because you're pooling the bank's money with it. We can buy more stuff, generate bigger profit, profit is ours. We just pay the bank the money back. We keep the profit. So you can create enormous leverage with that. I'll just give you guys one quick example. When I worked at HSBC in auto finance, we had a return on assets, which I'll explain to you guys later, of 1.75%. So ROA of 1.75%. So basically, to kind of simplify this, say that the interest rate on the loan was like 10%, was the interest rate on an auto loan. 1.75% of that was our profit on that 10%. But we increased this to 20% in terms of return on equity, which is what our shareholders got. Shareholders got a 20% return on their investment. How do we do that? How do we jump from this to that? By using the bank's money, right? We're a bank ourselves. HSBC is a bank. But the bank also borrows money, right? So we would borrow 92% of the loan that we're giving to you guys and use the other 8% as our money, right? So by using this leverage, we increase the return of our money multiples higher than the original return on assets. So this is a tool. Yeah, this is what banks do. They're highly levered like this. We call that leverage.
So what is the differences between the ROE and ROI? Is it the same?
It's similar. The return on investment, this is basically return on equity itself, right? And so return on investment doesn't necessarily have to use only equity. And this is looking at the return only on equity. So return on investment just looks at the investment itself and the asset and what is your profit, right? And calculates it like that. Go ahead.
You need to remind us with the equation for each one.
I will when we get to those chapters, but I don't want to do it quite yet. We'll get there very soon. But you guys will definitely get the equations. I just don't want to get too deep yet because we're just kind of talking about the high level stuff now. Now, working capital management is also a function of finance. So your working capital in this case means what? What is capital, you guys? Yeah, exactly. You remember that. Exactly. So current assets are assets that turn into cash within the year. And current liabilities are the bills we have to pay within a year, right? So the difference is the money that we have left over to work with, basically, right? We need to make sure we have enough capital to work with so we don't run out of cash when we're operating our business. So this is a way to measure that we have enough cash in the business. And we'll give you guys some exercises on that when we get there. Okay, so backing up to the very beginning. If you guys are going to start a new business, one of the first things you guys have to consider is what type of structure do you want to have for your company, right? Should you start a sole proprietorship? How many people are in a sole proprietorship, you guys? How many people own that? So the key with a sole proprietorship is sole means one, right? So this is a single owner, which has benefits and it has drawbacks as well. So what's a benefit of being the only owner of the company? Why might that be good? Yeah, you get all the profit, right? You make all the decisions. You don't have to worry about your partners and arguing with those guys and pleasing anybody. You're the king of the company. So this is good. But of course, if you die, what happens to the company? So you have a lot of power here. If you die, the company dies, right? So this is not so good, right? The amount of money that you can get to buy those assets, to buy those investments, this is limited, right? It's limited to how much you have personally and how much you guys can get from the bank. So your investment dollars are limited. Investment is limited. However, this is pretty fast and pretty easy to set this up, right? So this is another advantage. If you want to get the company started quickly, easy to start up a sole proprietorship. You also have liability, though, and here you have unlimited liability. What does that mean, unlimited liability? So liability in this case is a little bit different than the liability in the equation before. This means risk. This is risk, right? So for example, if I open up a cheeseburger business, right? And I don't know how to cook this stuff right. People get food poisoning when they're eating my cheeseburgers. They go to the hospital. What can they do to me in this case? If they go to the hospital, what can they do? Yeah, they can sue me, right? They can take, my business can go bankrupt. They can sue me for my personal assets. I could lose personal assets as well. I have no protection. On the other hand, if I set up a corporation has limited liability. They can only sue the corporation. They can't sue the investors behind the corporation. So the corporation shields the investors from full liability. They can only lose what they invested. They can't lose their personal assets. So investors like that sort of a structure. Now partnerships, you guys know what a partnership is. How many people in a partnership? Yeah, more than one, right? So that's greater than one. So that has some benefits. So you don't have quite as much power, right? Because now you're sharing the power, right? So not quite as great as before. You might have more arguments, right? Might be harder to make decisions. But in terms of your investment money, do you guys have more money to invest or less money? If you have a partner, more, because yeah, you can pool your resources together. Also, you can pool your knowledge together. Maybe you guys have different skill sets. So this is good. But still, usually if one of the partners dies, the partnership is also going to die. Your liability, what do you guys think? Is it the same or lower than this one? It's less because you can share your liability with your partners, right? We all get sued together. This is more fun. Yeah. And then corporation is the last one. How many people can own a corporation? Yeah, this is it's not greater than infinity, but it's equal to infinity, right? In theory, depending on the type of corporation. There's limits on certain types. But for a C corporation, there's unlimited potential investors. Therefore, your money is unlimited, right? So you can grow to be huge, like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook. This is great. They have limited liability, like we said before, which is another attraction. On top of it, how about the life of a corporation? How long can a corporation live?
Unlimited.
As long as it's
Unlimited, exactly. So like when Steve Jobs died, for example, Apple just continued. They hired Tim Cook and forgot all about Steve Jobs. No, they didn't forget, but yeah, so it has unlimited life. Yeah, so investors love this stuff, right? Their liability is limited. You can get very huge because of the investment potential. And you don't have to worry about the company dying because we can just get a new CEO, right? Get a new guy in there. So that's all attractive to investors. One of the drawbacks of a corporation is that it has double taxation. Double taxation in America and Europe and things like that. Now, so if you guys make a profit, right, the profit from the income statement, the profit is taxable, generally speaking, right? So that's the first tax, right? We have revenue minus expenses. This is actually taxable income when you have a corporate tax. Then we subtract the taxes, right? And then we get the net income after tax. So the NIAT is net income after tax. And we have two choices of what to do with this money. So whose money is this, by the way? In a corporation, who gets this money? Or whose money is this? The shareholders, exactly, the investors. Now we have two choices of what to do with that profit after tax. What are the two choices? Yeah, we can give it as a dividend, right? If you pay it as a dividend, then we have a tax. This is tax number 2. This is tax number 1. That's the double taxation. Or we can do what? If we don't give it to them. Yeah, reinvest it in the company, exactly. Exactly. Now, why should we do one versus the other, you think? When do we determine, what determines whether we give it back to them or we reinvest it in the company? What do you guys think?
There is no double taxation in this reinvesting?
Yeah, it depends on, basically when we get to the finance section, we'll talk about the required return that investors demand. Investors to invest in any company are expecting some sort of a return to invest in your company. If you can generate a return that's higher than what they require, then they like you to keep the money. Just reinvest it because you're doing better than I require. If you can't beat my required return, then I prefer you give it back to me because then I can invest in something else, right? So that's one of the big major requirements here. And all investors are different. Yeah, so what I recommend is that if you guys have a new business idea, maybe start as a sole proprietorship or a partnership to begin with because it's faster, it's easier. This can be complex to do this, more costly. But if it looks like it's going to take off, then you should switch to a corporation because then you can attract big-time investors, expand and become a billionaire. Why not? Just go for the biggest return. Now, these are some of the principles of finance that we'll talk about in the class. Time value of money, we've already talked about this one, right? What is the time value of money, you guys? What's time value of money? Yeah, the money has different values over time. Like you guys said, you'd rather have $100 today. Unfortunately, I didn't bring the $100 bills today, but yeah. I'm going to get them a year from now for you guys, though. You'd rather have it today than in the future because money's more valuable today. There's a risk-return trade-off, which we just talked about, right? So in general, the higher the risk, the higher the return. So as risk goes up, return goes up. So when we analyze these projects, which ones to invest in, we're going to incorporate not only the return, but also the risk. So we're going to adjust for both and adjust it for risk and return to figure out what's the value of the project. The higher the risk of this investment, the bigger the return is going to be, and this means a bigger discount of the future cash flows. We're going to reduce it more because the risk is greater as a result. So that's why this tool in finance is so powerful. It handles risk and return. If you don't want any risk, right, you just keep your money at home, right? Put it under the mattress or you put it in the bank that you trust, and then you have no risk. And here in Saudi Arabia, maybe no return, right? Because they don't give interest. Yeah. Okay. And market prices reflect information. So when we talk about market prices here, what am I talking about here? What do you guys think? In terms of market prices, I'm talking about which market? Relates to the E in the accounting equation. The E is what? You guys remember? What is the E? Equity. And who owns the equity? What do we call those guys? Shareholders in the corporation, which is traded on the stock market, right? So if we look at stock market prices, if we look up the price of Apple today or Google or Tesla, and if you watch these prices closely, you'll see as soon as bad news comes out on Elon Musk with Tesla, right, stock goes down immediately. So in general, we think that the market is efficient enough to incorporate all the past information into the prices today. Plus, it includes our best guesses of the future are also reflected in prices today. How is that possible? How is the future reflected in today's stock market price? How can that be reflected today? What do you guys think? How is that possible? Yeah, exactly. If there's a new project that we're starting, like Elon Musk is doing a new truck or semi-truck or whatever, he's doing a new rocket, that's SpaceX. Right, they haven't sold any products yet, but we make a projection into the future. The analysts do who are looking at the stock, how much money are they going to make? They present value this money and figure out what's the new value of Tesla given that they've got this new product, right? So the value goes up, stock price goes up immediately based upon our projections like that. Okay, individuals respond to incentives. This is basic economics. And as managers, you guys can use this to your advantage, right? We can get people to respond to incentives. There's something called a principal agent problem. Have you guys heard of that before? Principal agent. So principal is going to be, let's start with agents. What is an agent? What do you guys think is an agent? Yeah, so like James Bond is an agent, right? And who does James Bond work for? Who does he work for? Yeah, it's whoever it is, Her Majesty's Secret Service, whatever this is. I think it's the UK, whatever, MI5 maybe or something like that. So in this case, I forget in the James Bond movies what's the name of the lady that is his boss. I can't remember. But she's the principal, or he's the principal, right? That's the boss. Or the CEO is the principal, or the shareholders are the principal. Who's ever on top, right? And then you have the agent who's James Bond. So she may give James Bond an order to do this, but we've all seen the movies, right? Sometimes he gets off track. And he doesn't quite follow the orders of the boss. This is the principal agent problem, right? We want people to follow our orders directly. And as this relates to corporations, right? So in corporations, the principal is the shareholder. And the agent is the CEO, right? And so what do the shareholders want from the CEO? What do they want? Yeah, exactly. Investor. Agent is the CEO here. Yeah, they want the stock price to go high as possible, right? And you make it go higher by increasing the value of the company, right? Invest in assets that have a positive net present value, and you make the value go higher. And then my price of my stock goes higher, and I get richer. Exactly, but sometimes the CEO doesn't always do that, because the CEO is a human and they have their own desires. So in economics, we say as a person is not trying to maximize profit. A person tries to maximize happiness, right? So the CEO, we know, wants to maximize his or her happiness. And happiness to them might be buying that Lear jet so I can get to my meetings faster in Riyadh, right? Just fly right over there. Or maybe a helicopter is good. Fly over the sand dunes like that. Some nice artwork for my office would be nice. Get a Picasso or something like that. Yeah, this is not necessarily in the interests of the shareholders though, right? Because this is their money. So they want you to maximize profit, not waste the money. Have you guys heard of Tyco? There's a song that says, I forget the name of the song, but one of the lyrics in the song says, go Tyco with my money. It refers to this company and the CEO of Tyco, because he went Tyco with the money, shareholders' money of Tyco, right? He threw like his wife $1 million birthday parties using the company's money, had 24 karat gold shower rods in his New York, Manhattan apartments, expensive artwork, things like this. So eventually he got thrown in jail for defrauding investors. So again, he did this because that made him happy, right? This is the principal agent problem. So one of the ways we can solve that, besides oversights, right? There's some oversights. We have a board, right, that sits between the investors and the CEO. And it's their job to watch the CEO, right? So there's like 10 people that sit on this board. It's their job to review the financial statements, the big plans of the company, to hire the CEO, to fire the CEO. So they should be doing the job, but oftentimes these are maybe friends of the CEO. So maybe they're not watching too closely. They could be in on the Tyco deal here. But the other thing you guys can do is you can make these guys owners of the company, right? We can give them shares of the company. So that if they make good investments, share price goes up, they get rich. Together, they all get rich. So this happens to a lot of those guys, right? If you're the CEO of a major company, in America especially, you're making a lot of money, right? Jamie Dimon, I worked for him at JP Morgan Chase. He's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. And when I was working with him in Chicago, I think his salary was like $1 million, which for them, that's not a lot of money, right? So this is pretty small. Salary's $1 million, but with his bonuses and stock options and things like that, he can make another 30, 40, 50 million dollars, right? So the big piece of his money comes from the stocks. They make a killing on that stuff. And again, shareholders are happy to give that to him because the stock performs very well. And so he gets rich and they get rich together. And they all go on vacation together, whatever they do. It's fun. Okay, so those are the main principles of finance that you guys should know. Now this relates back to economics a little bit, you guys, and markets. So everything starts with the household, right? The household. What is a household? What is a household? Household is where we live, right? We all live in a house or something like a house, an apartment or something like that. Right? This is where everything comes from. In economics, we say there's these factors of production. Have you guys ever heard of that? The factors of production? This is from economics. So in economics, we say there's 4 factors of production. You have land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Now, land is not what you think it is, right? When we think of land, like we're standing on land right now, that's a piece of it, but it's not the only piece of it. So land is not only the land we're standing on, it's everything that comes from the land. The trees, the water, the minerals, the diamonds, the gold, the oil, all the natural resources are the land. Labor, we know what labor is. Labor is the people. What's capital? In this case, what's capital, you guys? Capital, you guys should know this. It's Riyadh. Riyadh is the capital. No, I'm joking, yeah. Yeah, capital in this case means those investments that we're buying, those assets, right? The factories, the equipment. It has many definitions. Capital has many definitions. But in this case, we mean those fixed assets, the big investments that we're buying. So we put these things together, right? We take the natural resources, the wood. We have some people, we have some machines, and we make something. And who's the one who makes it? Is the entrepreneur. They're the ones who combine everything together to make the product. So those are the factors of production. The price of all of these things, the land, how much does the wood cost? How much does the labor cost? How much does that machine cost? All determined by supply and demand. Right? Every market is different. Different demand, different supply, different prices. It's all determined there. And these are all owned by the household. Somebody owns the land. Somebody is the labor, right? That's us. Somebody owns that machine, and entrepreneurs live in the house. So they provide this to the companies, right? They provide it to the companies who then make the products. And then they sell those back to the household, right? So it's just a big circular thing, right? We provide the factors that produce the goods. They go back to the households. In return, the money flows in the other direction, right? We have to pay for these factors. Then we use that money to go shopping at Tamimi or wherever, at Jarir. So this is just showing the link between everything here. Opportunities in finance. So I don't know if any of you guys work in finance now. Does anybody work in finance? Yeah, what kind of companies do you guys work for?
Financial control and multinational company, children and company.
Nice. And how about you?
I work in Riyadh.
Nice, great. So I won't pick on the banks too much, a little bit. I like to pick on the banks a little bit because I worked for these banks. Not that bank, but other banks. Yeah, so if you guys like this subject, finance, it's not a bad idea to have a job in financial services. There's different jobs. You can do sales, you can do analysis, customer service, because the fact of the matter is you can make a lot of money in finance, right? If you look at the top hedge fund managers who are managing investments in the United States, do you guys know how much those guys make? The top hedge fund managers, if we Google top hedge fund manager pay in the United States, and you see how much the top guy made last year managing these investments in stocks and things like that, how much money do you think he made? Any idea? I told you Jamie Dimon made about $1 to $30 million, right? The hedge fund guy made more. So these guys can make like $250 million in a year. Yeah. And number two is like $240 million and $230 million. So they win it's like winning the lottery every year for those guys. So because in finance, right, this money can flow anywhere in the world, right? And they grab a little piece of this money, a little chunk of the money, of all this stuff that's flowing through the bank or through the stock market. And those little pieces add up to lots of change. So yeah, I know when I was working for those companies, when the banks are doing well, you make an enormous amount of money. I'm not sure about how it works here exactly. I know the banks here right now are very profitable because the interest rates have risen. But anyway, it's also essential for the economy, right? We need these banks. We need this money for our investments, the shareholders' money, the bank's money. We need money to buy cars, real estate. So even though sometimes we think of this stuff as being a little bit evil, in some ways I worked in the banking sector. Some of the stuff we did was a little bit evil because we're trying to squeeze as much money out of people as possible. I'm not saying you guys do that because I know the Saudi banks are much nicer. But in our case, I remember when I was at HSBC, for example, at one time there was we have different regulations in different states. And so Delaware would let us charge like a $25 late fee if you're late on your payments for the car, right? And then what we do is we lobby the government of Delaware to increase that. We want more. And so then they've eventually changed the law, and then we have a little board meeting. Delaware just changed the law to let us charge $50 instead of $25 for a late fee. All in favor of charging $50? Everyone raises their hand. Yes, because of course we're going to get a bonus for this. And they have a little gavel. They're like the judge. They're like, done. So yeah, any opportunity we had to get more money, we would do it. Another example would be we used to give people a discount if you would allow us to auto debit your checking account for your loan payment, right? We give you a little discount. But we found out that when we gave the discount, people were never late. We can't get these $50 late fees if you're always paying on time. So we're like, let's get rid of this thing. No more discount. We want people to pay late once in a while because our profit goes up. So now again, is this bad? Not necessarily if you look at it from the perspective of the corporation, right? Corporation is supposed to maximize profit. Excuse me. But on the other hand, if you go too far, there's going to be a backlash, right, from consumers and things like that. Consumers will protest or switch to another bank or another company. So when you guys are thinking about this stuff, there's a limit to how far we should go. Right? We should go far enough to maximize the value of the company, but no further. Because if we're going too far and it affects our customer retention rates and our growth of customers, then we've gone too far. So you have to be careful. You can't go too crazy. And in banking, there's a lot of laws there to protect consumers, as it is, like how much you can charge companies and things like that. But anyway, a lot of money. I worked in the insurance industry too before I moved to Korea. I was in Korea for a while. And these guys would sell insurance to corporate life insurance to companies. So you'd have life insurance policies on the executives of the company. The executive dies, the company gets the money, not the family. And these guys were so successful at doing this. This one guy was like the best in the United States at selling this insurance, and he made like $100 million. They both had $100 million in their bank accounts. And I worked for these guys in Florida. They had their own, they'd switch their cars every day from the Range Rover to the Porsche to the Mercedes to the Lexus to the whatever, had their own private jet. And they weren't bad people, they were just very successful. And if you're very successful in finance, you can make a lot of money. So it's something to think about. Yeah,
I have one question. Can you come back, please?
sure.
Again, please. Yes, for this one.
Yeah.
External is for the money and internal for the goods and service, right?
Say that one more time, sorry.
The external circle is it for money, right?
Yeah, this is the money exactly.
For the goods and services.
Exactly.
Right.
Perfect. Perfect. Looks good. Yep. Yeah, these are the products and the services, so the goods and the services, and the money is flowing in the opposite direction. Okay. Yeah, so these are just different things you guys maybe do with your own companies, right? We have budgeting and planning. This is very important. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Extending credit to customers. Banks do this, but also companies sometimes do this, right? If a customer is not paying you right away, you're essentially extending them a little bit of a loan. And by the way, this is interesting. I'm not picking on the banks again, but when you guys put your money into the bank, so the bank takes that money, right? And what do they do with that money?
It's in another bank.
Give to another.
They essentially invested, and the main investment of a bank is generally loans, exactly, right? So that's that. But yeah, but it's your money, right? So essentially, you're making a loan to the bank, right? You make a loan to the bank. Yeah, they're borrowing money from you, essentially, right? And then they loan it out to somebody else. They charge them profit, and they pay you something, maybe, or nothing. Yeah, but again, this is still a valuable service, right? Because without banks, right, then we have to individually find somebody to borrow us money for something like this. This is not easy to do. If I want to buy a house, I go to all you guys, can you lend me money to buy a house? I have to find somebody who has the money. Even if I find the money and then you say, okay, I'll lend you the money, and I'll be like, great, I'll pay you back in 20 years, right? They're like, no, I need it back next month. It's not going to work. So banks still provide a very valuable service by pooling this together. But I can pick on the banks because I used to work there. So evaluating large expenditures. So I'll show you guys how to do that. That's the assets, right? This is the capital budgeting. You guys can use MPV to do that. And this is very important too. What does that mean to raise money to fund the company? What does that mean?
Your investment maybe?
Yeah, so when you guys start a brand new company, right, you have a business plan. You guys should have a business plan. And then you're going to have what investment is required to start this company, right? You have to buy these assets, pay these employees, do some marketing, things like that. How much do you guys need? And how are you going to get that money? Can you get it from the bank? Are you going to use your credit cards? Are you guys going to go get a partner, get investors on Wall Street, things like that? So this is very important. Okay. These are different jobs. This is not exhaustive, of course, in finance that you guys can do. Now, if I were you guys, if I was wanting to work in finance, you could set the bar even higher, right? go for if you really want to go crazy, hedge fund manager, mutual fund manager, work on Wall Street in New York City. Those guys make a ton of money.
What they call it? Hedge? What they
Yeah, hedge fund managers. So hedge funds. Yeah, these guys, basically they invest money for very wealthy people, right? You need at least $1 million to invest in a hedge fund. And they use very sophisticated techniques, mathematical techniques to try to limit their risk and things like that. And they use a lot of leverage, like loans with it, to maximize the returns. And generally what works is they get a little bit of a salary, right? Maybe a salary is a small salary of maybe like $5 million, right? Just a little drop in the bucket. And their main money comes from their returns, right? If they increase the fund by $100 million, they get to keep 20% of that return. And if there's only like 5 guys in the funds, they split that, 5 ways. Of course, the owner's going to get more, right? So they keep 20% of the profits on top of this. And when they do really well, and they have a lot of investors, billions of dollars invested, yeah, they make a ton of money.
Here in the bank, we have credit control, like that.
So you guys do some credit control for this? Yeah. Yeah, there's lots and lots of different positions at the bank also for you guys. I mean, bank has all positions: HR, accounting, marketing, finance, sales, operations, everything you guys probably do already. If you do it at a bank, though, or in a finance company, generally you get paid more money because they just make more money in general. This is why you see a lot of companies like Ford Motor Company. They'll get into financing Fords themselves, right? And sometimes they make more money off of the financing than on selling the cars themselves. General Electric, same thing. They have a big finance unit because they see everybody making money in finance. They're like, why don't we start our own finance company? And they do. Now, the real sector relates to making real goods and services. So this is separate than the financial sector. So financial sector is how do we finance this? This is the investors and the banks and things like that. And it's the real sector that needs the financing. They're going to make real things. And this is the argument some people use against working in finance, right? You're not making anything, right? You're not actually making anything. So I think the finance people would disagree with you, though, because they feel like they're a part of making the stuff, right? Because they provide the financing to that startup company. So they feel that their money is helping to make things and create jobs and things like that. But other people think, no, you're not really doing anything. You're just moving money around, which is some truth to that. We move it around. We take a little bit for ourselves. Okay, so I'm not going to watch these videos, but you guys can look at those if you want to. This is a basic org charts. You guys have probably seen one of these for your companies, right? We start up on top with the stockholders, right? What's the stockholder, you guys? What's a stockholder? What is a stockholder? Yeah, go ahead.
It will be some investors or customers or shareholders.
Yeah, these are the investors. They elect the board of directors, right? So like 10 people or whatever. And what is the job of the board of directors again, you guys?
Control CEO.
Yeah, they're supposed to be watching the CEO because we have our day jobs to worry about, right? We put our money in the stock market. We elect them to watch for us because we can't keep track of these CEOs to see if they're going Tyco with their money. Right? Then, of course, the CEO gets to elect his management team, right? So the guys who report to that. And then on from there. We have, under finance, we have many different sectors. And the names of this change based upon what type of company you guys are working in. So most people have controllers, right, who are responsible for the actual financial statements. and controlling the cash. And some people have treasurers, some don't. They just combine another function. And these guys are worried about cash management and things like that, making sure the company doesn't run out of money. I know at go ahead.
Where's the GM exist here?
Again, it's because this is just a different org chart. So different companies have general managers. When I was at Bank of America, we had managing directors, executive managing director, senior executive managing director. Everybody's a vice president of the bank, even if you're low level, because it sounds good. I remember when I first worked for Bank One, and I wasn't a vice president, and then they made me an associate vice president. I called my mom, I'm like, Mom, I'm a vice president. And then I found out everybody's a vice president. It's like, I didn't tell her that, but yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the goal of the firm, like I said, I think this is the better definition. Maximize the shareholder wealth, which means maximize the value of the company. Right? If we choose a positive net present value project, the value of the company goes up. And if you take the value and divide it by the number of shareholders, number of investors, investor shares, this is the price per share. Right? So if we can get the value to go up by choosing positive net present value projects, like Tesla is doing a new car, right? That's going to add value. Then divide that by the number of shareholders, value goes up, price goes up. Maximize the value. And shareholders are very happy then because they're making a profit. They can sell this stock for a profit. That's what you guys want to do. And here's how we're going to do it. So we have the financial manager. And not all companies do this, but this should be done. I remember at that Florida company, they were investing in this new insurance system. We had all these meetings and stuff. And I'm like, because I'm good with databases and stuff, I'm like, I can make this system that we're buying myself and save us money. So I'm like, Bryant, similar to my name, Brian, but the chief operating officer was Bryant. I'm like, Bryant, did you do a net present value on this project? He's like, no, because he went to Arizona Business School. Okay. And I'm like, do you want me to do that for you? I can see if this is positive or not. And I did this, and I'm like, this has got a negative net present value. We're spending all this time in meetings. You add up all that time, it's not paying for we have a negative value doing this project. I said, we can design this thing ourselves for less. So he shouldn't have did the project, but the problem was in real life, right, it's not always so simple. Because he told the board of directors already, he sold the board on the need for them, it's their money, right, to invest in this project. So for him to go back and say, hey guys, I made a mistake, I didn't do the net present value, Brian says it's a bad idea, he might get in trouble for that. So it took him a while, like a year, before he finally found the opportunity to cancel that project, and we did it my way. So again, they weren't doing this process. But somebody at your company should be analyzing these big projects and calculating the net present value to make sure it's adding value to the company. So yeah, if it's at positive net present value, which means it increases the share price, then we're going to accept it. Otherwise, we're going to reject it. And I'll show you guys other methods as well, besides net present value, because net present value is something that not everybody understands easily. So if you have somebody who studied finance, no problem. They'll understand, they like net present value, they love it. But if they haven't, you can use other techniques also to show them the value of this. Now, when it comes to stakeholders, what's the difference between a stakeholder and a shareholder, you guys?
The people who are involved in the complete process, regardless the position and the size of investment.
Isn't the stakeholder the guy at the restaurant that's bringing the steak to your table? No, okay, yeah. No, you're right. So stakeholder is anyone who has an interest in the company, right? So employees have an interest in the company. Who else has an interest in the company? Customers, suppliers, who else? Shareholders, who else? Government, right? Because they want some taxes from you, things like that. So we have to consider all the stakeholders when we make decisions as well. Like I said, with this HSBC and us doing this thing for profit, yeah, to a certain point, we should slow down because maybe somebody's going to revolt on this if we take too much money from these customers. Or if we're a factory and we're polluting into the environment or into the river or to the ocean, maybe somebody's going to get angry about that, right? There's other stakeholders that care about the environment. And people have to breathe the air. So we should consider these things to some extent, right? Because we still have to run a business. We can't go crazy and have no pollution, and because that maybe is too costly to do that. So it's a fine line. It's a fine balance. And again, you just want to do it to maximize the value, right? So you do enough to maximize the value and have good public relations at the same time. That's my view, of course, but other people with other companies take it to more extreme levels, right? There's green companies that are new that are very socially oriented, right? They don't invest in anything that's bad. They want to plant trees or give money away to people. That's their prerogative, right? So this is also successful in some areas. And that's what we're talking about here, corporate social responsibility. So this is just kind of just something to keep in mind, because we focus mainly here on numbers and things like that. If the number's high, you go for it. But of course, it's not that simple. We should also consider the other effects that this is going to have on people and populations, which relates to the ethics, right? What is ethics, you guys? Business ethics. What does ethics mean? Yeah, this is morals. This is right and wrong. And so probably all of you guys have been involved in something in your life, right, where you have to choose between this and that, right? And you know in your mind whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. And so this, of course, business is not immune to this stuff. And sometimes, a lot of times, in fact, businesses get in certain situations and they end up making unethical decisions. Have you guys heard of Enron? This is the famous case. Enron was an energy trading company in Texas. And I don't fully understand this because somehow what they would do, one thing they would do is they buy and sell energy from different states, like in a market. They would buy and sell this stuff and make money off of the trading like you would with stocks. Another thing they did was they could somehow move energy from one state to another state. And to me, I don't understand that because I'm a finance guy. I don't know how that works in reality. But somehow that works, apparently. But what these guys would do was on numerous unethical things, right? For one, they lied on their financial statements, right? So the income statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow. They wouldn't give all these to investors. They'd hide one of them. Because if you give all these to investors, investors can tell because they have to link together in certain ways that something's funny. But if you pull one out, you can't prove that something weird is going on. So it turns out they would say their profit is going higher, 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 higher. So the chart of their profits is looking something like this. Their net income is going like that. But it was all a big lie. In reality, the profit was actually like this. It was less than zero. They were losing money. So it started probably something like this, where they started to lose money. Some deal went bad, right? The CEO goes to the CFO and says, can you change the numbers, make them look better? I'm going to fix this problem. Next quarter, we'll have it fixed. We'll recover. Just a one-time thing, right? So then you're in a dilemma as this chief financial officer. Do you do this? Do you not do this? If you do this, you could be in trouble. On the other hand, if you don't do this, maybe you're going to lose your job. They can make life very uncomfortable for you, things like that. Maybe they have some blackmail against you, I don't know. So anyway, the CFO went along with this, And then, of course, it didn't get better, it got worse. And then once you've done this bad deed, then you're stuck. You're going to jail at this point. So you might as well just keep going and make this thing last as long as you can. Keep the lie going, because the jail sentence is only going to be whatever the jail sentence is going to be at this point. So during this time, the other bad thing that they did, they'd have meetings with their employees. And the CEO would be like, oh, Enron is doing so fantastic. You should invest your money in Enron stock. All of your retirement go into Enron stock, because they need the money. So the employees are putting all their money into this. So when eventually some whistleblower told the government that they were cheating on the financials, what happened to the stock price of the company in this case? Yeah, it went down to 0, right? And what happened to everyone's retirement income? Gone. What happened to their jobs as well? Gone. This is why it's not a good idea in general to invest your money in the company that you work for. Because if the company goes bankrupt, you lose your job and your retirement. So it's better to, if you could, it'd be better in finance, we call this shorting the company. So you can bet against your own company. But of course, this is not allowed. This is also not allowed. I remember when I was taking this finance class in Chicago, when I was working for Bank One, and the professor was telling us that, I'm like, I'm going to short Bank One stock. So I Googled this, right? And then there's a policy in the employee handbook says you're not allowed to short the stock of the company, right? Because that's going to look bad if I'm working for Bank One, and I'm like, yeah, I'm shorting the company. Then what do I know that you don't know, right? Maybe I have inside information. Company's not doing well. But from an insurance standpoint, right, this makes sense to bet against the company, because if the company goes bankrupt, the short actually would make money and pay you off. Since we can't do that, though, and since your employer's not going to like that, you can just diversify your money in other companies, right? Maybe that are not related, so you protect yourselves. Yeah, so there's numerous stories here. And the point is, especially in finance and accounting, because these numbers control the stock price. If we make the profit go up, price goes up. So there's oftentimes pressure on finance people to do different things. There's a certain gray area in finance where we can move things around legally. It may not be ethical, but we can do that without breaking the law. But after a certain point, then you're actually breaking the law, and you can go to jail and things like that. The Florida company gave me so many stories. Bryant came to me. They want me to publish some numbers to this investment journal about how much money that they're managing as an investment company. And the first thing I did is try to recalculate last year's number that they published, right? And they said they had something like 30 billion, and not 30 billion, but say $1 billion in assets under management last year. Say it was 2010. I was in 2011. So the first thing I do is try to recompute that number to see if my technique is correct, right? And I come up with not $1 billion, I come up with like 700 million. I'm like, and then if I use my technique, the new number will be like 750 million, which means we're going to go like this, graphically in this business magazine, right? It's going to look like we're going down, and that's not going to look good for us, right? So the marketing lady, I don't know why it was the marketing lady who asked me to do this, Bryant probably sent her, said, I'm like, how did you guys come up with $1 billion last year? I can't come up with that number. And she's like, well, Bryant's always just looks at last year's number and he just increases it, right? Just makes the number up. I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm not going to do that for you guys. If you want to make numbers up, like that sounds like marketing to me. So actually they had one of the sales guys make up the number. They fired him later, but this is one of those situations, right? You're kind of, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because maybe if you do it, you get a promotion. But if the company gets caught, who's going to get the blame for this? Yeah, you're going to get the blame. You're the fall guy. So, but companies do this stuff. So you have to make the ethical decision. And I determined at that point, I'm like, no, I'm not going to make an unethical decision for you guys. we talked about the link between finance and economics before, you guys. Right? Economics is a decision-making science. And I'll give you guys tools on how to, with finance, on how to make these investments. Now, in economics and in finance, we do what's called a marginal cost, marginal benefit analysis. Have you guys heard of this before? We know what a cost and a benefit is, right? You guys know what a cost and a benefit is. But what do I mean by marginal costs and marginal benefits? What does that mean?
It's delta. So plus minus. So at that point, you have to check the percentage or that area. And stop point, let's say.
You're on the right track. So the best example I can think of in this case is pizza, because I love pizza. Right? So say you're hungry, right? And we get a benefit when we eat this pizza, right? Because we feel better and things like that. So the first bite of pizza, if you guys are hungry, the benefit's very high because the pizza's delicious, right? The second bite is still beneficial because you're still hungry, but it doesn't taste quite as good as the first one, and you're not as hungry as you were on the first bite. So the marginal benefit is decreasing over time, right? So marginal benefit falls over time like this. And that is what happens with demand as well. Demand is a measure of marginal benefit. For suppliers, on the other hand, there's also a cost. Like for you guys in this class today, we do 1 to 10 o'clock, right? So the longer you stay in class, we have something called an opportunity cost. What's an opportunity cost? You guys know what is an opportunity cost? In economics, we talk about this opportunity cost. So you guys have different kinds of costs for this class. One cost you have is a sunk cost, right? You guys had to pay for this class, right? Can you guys get your money back for this class? No. Janos will tell you that, right? He's not going to give your money back once the class starts because that's not fair. So in economics, we call that a sunk cost. You can't get this money back. So that should have no effect on whether you guys stay in the class or not all day until 10 o'clock. I hope you do, but some people leave because of the other costs. There's an opportunity cost. What are you giving up to be here today, right? What would you guys be doing if you're not here? What's your next best alternative? That's your opportunity cost. And this rises the longer we stay in class, right? Because this becomes, you get a little more tired and you want to see your family a little bit more, or you're hungry or whatever. So that thing tends to rise over time, which is the supply curve. And the minute that the marginal cost in class exceeds the marginal benefit, because the benefit changes over time as well. In the beginning of the class, maybe you'll get more benefit because you guys are fresher, you're still interested to listen to me. But over time, as your head gets full of knowledge, there's only so much you can absorb in that period of time, right? So the benefits go down, the cost is going up, and eventually some people leave because of that. So whenever I teach classes, I realize that I'm like, when somebody leaves, I'm like, marginal cost exceed marginal benefit. We're all different, right? We have different things going on that day or whatever that leads us to our decision. So that's what we mean by marginal cost, marginal benefit. So when we're making a decision, we compare the marginal cost to the marginal benefit. Should I stay, how long should I stay in class? Well, it depends on the marginal benefit of the next hour versus the marginal cost. If the benefit's greater than the cost, you guys will stay in class, right? And part of the benefit for you guys is you want to pass the class, right? You want to get your MBA, so you're here to get the knowledge and figure out how to work these problems and things like that. That's why I do the problems at the end, right? So the other thing you guys can do as managers is you use this information as a tool to get people what you want them to do, this principal-agent problem. In this case, I'm the principal, and you guys are the agent, right? And if I want you guys to stay longer, I can give you incentives to stay longer by showing you guys how to do the exercise problems in the workbook at 8 o'clock tonight. So for example, it makes it easier than doing it by yourself. But also the other reason to do that is because then you're most tired. And then, yeah, it's better to actually work on stuff because then your ability to listen after a certain point in time is going to go down. So think of that when you're dealing with your employees, right? You have to think of what they like, what's the benefit to them, what's the cost to them. There's things you can do to alter their decision to make them do what you want them to do without necessarily needing to pay them more money if you get to know what they like, right? And provide those incentives. And of course, there's the other side of the story too. There's carrots and there's sticks. So carrot is something good, right? And there's also a stick. So some people use both, right? And here I don't, but at other university classes I can. Right here I can't, but other traditional university classes, if somebody leaves, that can affect their grade, right? Or I give them a class participation grade if they come in late, blah, blah, blah. Or I can give them extra credit. So, and in some universities, if you miss enough classes, then you can't pass the class. So this is the stick. Together you use these things as managers, carrots, good incentive, sticks, and to get the results that you guys want. To influence the marginal benefits and the marginal costs. That's what we can do here. This one we already talked about, right? Interaction of supply and demand are determining prices. And we'll talk about how competitive markets differ over time, right? There's different types of markets. On the extreme example, there's a monopoly. Do you guys know what a monopoly is? Not the board game, but that's a fun game. But what is a monopoly? This is one company like Aramco, right, that dominates the market. Or the Saudi Electric Company, or the Saudi Water Company, right? That's one company that controls the entire water supply. Right, so they have a lot of power to do pricing. And in these cases where they control some vital resource like that, the government, well in this case the government owns these companies, right? They're going to control the price. Because if a private person owned all the water in Saudi Arabia and they want to maximize profit, you know, the water prices would be outrageously expensive because we need water to survive. So the idea here is as you have more, as you move to more like a monopoly, you have greater power over pricing and things like that. And the other side of the spectrum in economics is something called perfect competition. And this is kind of a made-up world, just to show the other extreme. When you have no pricing power, there's so many buyers and so many sellers that you're just a price taker. Supply and demand determine the price. There's no profit in the long run. But this is the best case for consumers, right? Because they get the lowest price possible. And the real world is going to be in between. So depending on where you guys are within your industry, how close you are to monopoly versus perfect competition, that determines your strategy to some extent. So if you guys took the strategy class, this is important for determining how you guys interact. There's something over here called an oligopoly, which is a few companies that dominate the market, like STC, Mobily, and Zain, right? If you have a few companies like this, your strategy is different because if you're STC, you have to pay attention to what Zain and Mobily are doing. There's few of them, so you can study them closely. And it's like playing chess. If I do this, what are they going to do? You have to think ahead of the game. And if you can, what you want to do is you want to collude on the prices. What does that mean to collude on prices? Yeah, you agree on prices. And do you want your price to be higher or lower? Higher, exactly. Now, in most countries, this is illegal to do that. If Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile in the US sat together in a room to come up with new prices for internet and raise them together, they would go to jail. Because this is called explicit collusion. It's illegal. So there's ways to do this strategically without breaking the law. One is like price leader strategy, right? The biggest one, STC, moves first. They're the first mover. Raise the internet price. Other ones follow. If they don't follow, what can STC do to them to punish them? Lower the prices, right? Because they have more money. They can try to hurt their profit. Tank the prices will make you guys lose money, go out of business if you don't follow us. This is a strategy you can use. And if you follow this strategy, it's legal to do this. So a lot of companies do that, like JP Morgan. Right? JP Morgan will move first on interest rates because they're the biggest. They go up, all the other banks follow. If they don't, then they'll punish them. Yeah, so that's interesting. So depending where you guys are with your companies determines your strategy that you guys can do. Over here, you can't do too much, right? Over here, you differentiate, make your product different, advertise. Now here's a little example for you guys. Okay, so take a look at this and tell me what you guys think about this. I'll let you guys take a look. What is this telling us here? So do you guys think we should buy this new computer or not? What do you guys think?
Yes,
Why?
it's positive 1,000.
Yeah, so we're this is the marginal benefit, marginal cost example, right? What are the additional benefits of the new computer, right? They somehow quantify that. 10,000, right? It's the benefits over the old computer. The old computer provided us $3,000 worth of benefits. So we get a marginal benefit of 7,000 by buying the new computer. That's the benefit. And then look at the cost. How much does it cost us to buy the new computer? 8, right? And we can sell the old computer for how much? 2. So our marginal cost is 6. Is the marginal benefit greater than the marginal cost? Yeah, so should we do it or not? Yeah, we do it. Again, this is not exactly how we do this in finance. This is an accounting or an economics method of doing this. In finance, it's a little more refined because this does not consider the time value of money, right? When do these cash flows occur? And in finance, we correct that and make an even better decision. So relationship to accounting, like I said, we use cash flow in finance. Cash flow is one of the accounting financial statements. So we're going to use the financial statements from accounting to do this. And we'll also do something, not necessarily in this class, but in finance we do something called pro forma financial statements. Do you guys know what that means, pro forma? Pro forma. Pro forma financials means to predict the future. So if you guys are going to do a new company, the investors want to see your projections of the income statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow. So we started an insurance company in the US, and so I did these projections like 5 years into the future. Then I figure out the value of the company, right? Which is kind of funny because this is a company that doesn't exist yet, right? But I project out what we're going to make, present value of the cash flows, and came up with a value of like $1 billion. And then we go to Wall Street with our business plan. We say, we need, I think we were asking for $30 million. And when they looked at the valuation, they're like, this valuation's really high. But I did this strategically because, right, if they're going to give us, say, $100 million, which is what they want to give us, and I said the company's worth $1 billion, right? What percent of the company should I give them if they give me $100 million and the company's worth $1 billion? What percent of the company should they own for that $100 million? What do you guys think? 10%, right? This is 10% of, yeah. So, and these investors typically want half. right? So this is a strategy by me to start out with a high number. So you should fairly get 10%, but they want 50. Okay, we'll settle at 30. You guys can get 30, we keep 70. And so it's just a tool, a negotiating thing. And they don't care. So yeah, I needed accounting to do that. We needed accounting to do that. And this we'll talk about later, cash flow. You guys will do some exercises in your workbook to project the future cash flow for your companies to see if you guys have enough money. Now take a look at this one. We have a little yacht example that we sold for. How much did we sell this yacht for, you guys? What's the sales price of the yacht? Yeah, so the sales price is the cost to the buyer, not to us, 100,000. And what was our cost to make the yacht? 80,000. So this is not really a yacht. This is like a boat, I guess. But yeah, it's not like one of those big yachts. I remember when I was in the Bahamas one time, I was taking a cruise and I was coming back to the cruise ship in a taxi. And then I looked out there, I see this huge cruise ship coming in. And the taxi driver's like, that's not a cruise ship, that's somebody's yacht. I'm like, really? And when the yacht, he's like, yeah, that's Paul Allen from Microsoft. His yacht was coming in. And by the time I got to the dock, Paul Allen's like giant yacht is there. At one time it was the biggest in the world. And then the funny part too is that he's got like 2 sister ships that sail with it, which are already enormous, like much bigger than this room. 2 sister ships. It's like an armada of boats with a helicopter pad and all this stuff. Anyway, so more expensive than this yacht. But now look at this. We paid all these expenses already. Did we get our money from the yacht yet? No. So in this case, what is the profit going to be? If we calculate the net income for this company, what's the profit going to be on this yacht? Exactly. Profit's going to be 20,000. So if we look at the income statement's going to show 20,000 profit. But if we look at the cash flow statement, cash flow is going to show minus 80 exactly. Minus 80 exactly. So this illustrates the difference between cash flow statement and income statement, because income statement is not cash. And we have to keep an eye on the cash because maybe we'll run out of money here. Yeah, so that's the difference there. Now, you can do your financials on a cash basis. Well, it's possible to do it. Let me say that. It's not allowed to do it legally, though. Legally, companies use this accrual basis, where in this case, we record revenue when it's earned, not when we receive the cash. And we record expenses when the expense is incurred, not when we pay the expense. So for example, on the expense side, if we pay people biweekly, if we pay them on 12/7, 12/14, 12/28, the next paycheck is going to be when? Somewhere in January, right? Let's say it's January 12 or something like that. Now, we've always paid them from the 15th to the 28th, right? From the 8th to the 14th. Now, the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st, those employees still worked at our company, right? So we owed them money. We incur an expense, but we won't pay them until next month. So in accounting, these 3 days, 12/29 to 12/31, we have to record the wage expense. That's called accrual accounting. So it doesn't matter if we pay them or not. We've incurred the expense. We owe them the money, so it has to be recorded in that period. So this is another reason why income statement does not equal cash flow, and why we need to look at both of those together to analyze how the company is performing.
What we call this in the accounting?
This is the accrual method. This is accrual accounting. Yeah, accrual accounting. Accrual basis. This is legally what you have to do. It also makes your earnings more smooth, right? It's not jumping around. Even with cars that we buy, if you guys buy a car for cash for your company, and it's 200,000 SAR, right? Cash flow is minus 200,000 in that year. But in terms of the expense of the car, we expense the car over the lifetime of the car, right? If the car lasts 5 years, we divide the 200,000 into 60 months and depreciate it all those times. And that's another accrual method, right? Because the car is helping us to produce revenue over the entire life of the car, or the entire life of the machine, or the entire life of the factory. And this is another reason why the income statement then is going to be different than cash flow. And we have to look at those together. Now, and this is a personal finance example. So I don't know if you guys keep track of your personal finances. I do. It's a good idea to do this because especially when you go on vacation. Although when you're on vacation, this is particularly hard to do. Because I find myself, if I'm in the Philippines, when you're having a good time, my wife is down there, I kind of lose track of the money. And things are cheap, so you're like, oh, it's not going to be much. You just use the credit card here, there. Suddenly, like all the money's gone, right? So, and you're lazy to keep track of it on vacation. But again, if you don't keep track of it, this is what can happen. So you guys have maybe experienced this, right? Especially when you're new to finance, when you first graduate from undergrad and you open up your first bank account. I don't know if this happened to you guys, but for me, yeah, I went below zero a couple times because I'd write a check or something. You don't keep track of what you spent, and yeah, you went below zero. So yeah, so I suggest you guys do this as well because it's good for your own personal benefit. Yeah, so again, here in terms of decision making, accounting is going to be different than the finance tools. So accountants are more concerned with profit and things like that. Finance, we're concerned with the cash flow and future value versus present value and things like that. But they're both useful to look at both of these things together. So I'll show you how to do both of those. Okay, and that's the end of section 1, you guys.